But it's something when we say we sustain someone, it's really a component of trust, faith, meaning action, and prayer. So I thought that was just an awesome section or verse in the section 107 to explain how we sustain our leaders.
Welcome everybody to this week's podcast. I'm Rod Meldrum, and I've got with me Jonathan Neville, and he is coming to us live from Oregon and the coast.
Yep.
So this is lesson number 39. We're going to be talking about sections 106, 107, and 108 today, and I'm excited about having Jonathan join us with some insights involving the church history and some other things there. We want to reiterate that we are expecting that you'll have gone through the lesson manual here and gone through your gospel doctrine class, or we'll go to that. And so this is supplemental material, so hopefully it gives you some additional insights and information that you'll find helpful as you study the Doctrine and Covenants this year.
Yep.
All right, Jonathan, you want to go ahead and lead us off there?
Okay, I'll start with sharing a screen here that kind of is our orientation screen, because it shows the picture here in the manual for sections 106 to 108. And it has Elder Suarez's teaching here, which we'll go ahead and read. Yep. It says, we need to abide in the Savior, immersing ourselves in the scriptures, rejoicing in them, learning his doctrine, and striving to live the way he lived. And then it says, as you immerse yourself in Doctrine and Covenants 106 to 8, record ways you can strive to live the truths that you discover. So as a little bit of an orientation for these three sections is right in the introduction, where we can see here, this is the introductory material for each one of these. And they took place between November of 1834 and December of 1835, all in Kirtland. The first one is directed to Warren Cowdery, which was Oliver's brother, his older brother. Mm-hmm. Warren Cowdery played an important role in several of these incidents and revelations, and we'll talk about that maybe when we get to section 110. I think it was him that recorded that. The next one was 107, was a revelation on the priesthood, but it also was a two-part. As it points out, the historical records show that most of the verses 60 through 100 were actually received back in November of 1831, and then later incorporated with this. Most of you know on the podcast here that some of the very early revelations were edited before they were published in the Book of Commandments, and then again when they were published in the Doctrine and Covenants, similar to the way Joseph revised the Book of Mormon in 1837 and 1840. Then section 108 was given to Lyman Sherman, who had a request. So we'll get to each of those as we go. I think to start it off, I'll just do one more, and then Rod has some material to talk about in section 106. But I like this passage in section 106, verse 6, where it says, verily I say unto you, there is joy in heaven when my servant Warren bowed to my scepter and separated himself from the crafts of men. And as you know, I've been interested in intertextuality among the scriptures and other writings. This one apparently comes from Luke. It's an allusion to Luke, where in Luke, the Lord said, I say unto you that likewise joy shall be in heaven over one sinner that repenteth, more than over 99 persons which need no repentance. Likewise, and then in verse 10, likewise I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of angels. So those two verses in Luke are not exactly as they are in the Doctrine and Covenants, but they're close enough. They give the same kind of a meaning, so we consider that intertextual. I'm going to show you in a minute a little bit more about how we do intertextuality there. But I like this picture of it depicts joy in heaven.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. I have a couple other pictures of different artists depicting their ideas of joy in heaven. I like both of these a lot for different reasons, but you can see how it's interesting that this one, several of these paintings that I looked up are juxtaposed in cemeteries. This one has a couple of tombstones in it. So it's kind of the idea of a resurrected beings getting together when they're resurrected and seeing each other, or in heaven, you know, those ideas about joy in heaven. It's just such a cool thing. And that phrase "joy in heaven" only appears in the Doctrine and Covenants. As I said, it's not directly in the Bible. However, as I've talked about many times, it is in Jonathan Edwards.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, and this is interesting because look how Jonathan Edwards paraphrased Luke 15:7 by saying, "There is joy in heaven over one sinner that repenteth." So the actual verse says there's joy shall be in heaven, but he paraphrased it to say joy in heaven, the way the Doctrine and Covenants uses it. And then later on, the scriptures tell us there is joy in heaven and among the angels from the conversion of one sinner. He says there will be joy in heaven among the angels, but he used that phrase quite often. So this is another indication of how it was in Joseph's lexicon, his mental language bank, by the things that he had read from Jonathan Edwards, and those chunks of language just came out in the Revelations. One more example from section 106, verse 7, the Lord said, "Blessed is my servant Warren, for I will have mercy on him, and notwithstanding the vanity of his heart, I will lift him up inasmuch as he will humble himself before me." So Warren Cowdery had some vanity in his heart that the Lord recognized, and he said, "That's okay, nobody's perfect. I have mercy on you. I will lift you up as long as you humble yourself." Well, that same concept of vanity in his heart doesn't appear anywhere else in the scriptures. But Jonathan Edwards talked about in several places the vanity of man's heart. In this case, he says, "How great is the vanity of man's heart that he should think that he, by his religion and righteousness, has laid some tie upon the God of heaven and earth." In other words, that, people tend to have this vanity of heart, thinking that they're so righteous, they have a claim on heaven, when it's really the Lord's mercy that does it. It's not us demanding things. The Lord has mercy on us. So that's an important part of this. Okay, I'll stop that share. And then you had some things you wanted to bring up out of section 106, right?
Yeah, section 106. Again, this is the older brother of Oliver Cowdery. But then he says in verse 4, he says, "And again, verily I say unto you, the coming of the Lord draweth nigh, and it overtaketh the world as a thief in the night." I just wanted to make a couple of comments because I know a lot of people are interested in last days signs and timelines and all that kind of thing. And right. I like to tell people that the Lord actually has promised that He's going to provide signs. He said that He will have these signs. The signs will be pretty clear for those who are seeking to know and understand the signs. But he says, but the world is going to be overtaken like a thief in the night. As I thought about that, a thief in the night, you feel pretty violated.
Yeah.
One time we had somebody break into our house, and
really,
yeah, when we lived in Sandy, and somebody broke into our house and just stole a few things and whatever. But I tell you what, it makes you really just go, gosh, I mean, not only do you feel violated, but you feel vulnerable. You're kind of like, oh, sure. Okay, so we ended up getting a alarm, security system and all this kind of stuff put in, because I understand that once you get broken into, if they really rob a bunch of stuff, then usually about 3 or 4 months later they hit it again, because now you've got new stuff because you just got replacement things from your insurance company. But anyway, so we didn't want that to happen. But anyway, so when it talks about being overtaken like a thief in the night, it's a pretty vulnerable feeling. You feel like, oh, I really, man, I should have done something more. Maybe I could have put a security system in before I got robbed or whatever, Yeah. But when it talks about this, I think it's important that the next part of it, the next verse says, "Therefore gird up your loins, that ye may be the children of light, and that day shall not overtake you as a thief." Mm-hmm. So for those who have the gospel in their lives, and those who are looking for and studying the signs of His coming, which He has commanded us to do, actually, it won't be a complete surprise. In fact, it'll be, like He says, it's not going to be like a thief in the night. It's going to be a knowledgeable thing. You're going to understand that this is what's coming down the pike, this is what's happening, and this is where we're at. And so it's not going to be a complete surprise for you. Still doesn't say anything about not being difficult anymore, but he says for the children of light, it's not going to do that. So,
but it's like it says also, if you're prepared, you won't fear, right?
Yeah, exactly. So be prepared and don't fear, and then you can go out and serve.
Yep.
All right, so let's go on to the revelation on priesthood. Now we could go on this, for a week, but again, we're not trying to cover all the things that are in here. There's just a few things that we want to touch bases on. And so do you want to start off with that then?
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of briefly overview how the organization of the church developed over time. And so I have another little slideshow here we can look at. And it says, we all know that the church was organized in 1830, as I showed here. And at the time, how many people were there in the church? How many signed the organizational documents? Remember?
The 6,
only
I think, was it?
6. Yeah, it was only 6. And so at that time, there weren't that many members of the church. But the Revelation said here it said, the commandments were given to Joseph Smith, who was called of God and ordained an apostle of Jesus Christ, to be the first elder of this church, and to Oliver Cowdery, who was also called of God, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to be the second elder of the church. So really at this time, the very first organization of the church consisted of a first elder and a second elder, who are both ordained apostles. So Joseph and Oliver were both ordained apostles. And then there were elders and eventually priests and teachers. And that was the whole organization. But when you had so few members, that's all the organization you needed, right?
Right. Yep.
So then around 1832 or so, 1831, some of the bishops were called. This shows the progression of the original organization in 1830 in the blue, and then in the green it has the 1831-1832 era, where bishops were called for Zion, which was, as we discussed before, in Missouri, and then the bishop in Kirtland were financial officers. There were presiding elders in the branches, and then there were the presidents of the high priesthood. We had high priests and a lesser priesthood. So that was all. We don't take the time to go through all the verses, but this was the organization circa roughly 1832. And at this point, after Joseph Smith organized the first presidency in 1832, Oliver Cowdery's status was a little unclear. And he brought this up to Joseph Smith and he said, well, wait a minute, in the Revelation, it says I'm the second elder. How do I fit in here? And so on December 5th of 1834, Joseph ordained Oliver Cowdery to be the assistant president. And the minutes of the meeting state that Joseph said the following words when he laid his hands on Oliver's head. He said, in the name of Jesus Christ, who is crucified for the sins of the world, I lay my hands upon thee and ordain thee an assistant president to the high and holy priesthood in the Church of the Latter-day Saints. This was in December of 1834. So this is significant, as those of you who watch the podcast know, because Oliver Cowdery was writing the history of the church at this time. And he published these 8 letters that we've discussed several times in 1834 and 1835. And after he was ordained assistant president of the church was when he wrote the letters, I think it was 4 through 8. So the minutes here are kind of cool to read in the Joseph Smith papers, because you can read the actual original minutes from December 5th of 1834 as a Friday evening. And the minutes say, according to the direction of the Holy Spirit, President Smith, Joseph Smith, Assistant President Sidney Rigdon and Frederick G. Williams, assembled for the purpose of ordaining First High Counselor Oliver Cowdery to the office of Assistant President of the High and Holy Priesthood in the Church of the Latter-day Saints. It is necessary for the benefit of the reader that he be instructed into or concerning the power and authority of the above named priesthood. And this is Joseph Smith explaining what the authority of the priesthood was. First, the office of the president is to preside over the whole church, to be considered as at the head, to receive revelations for the church, to be a seer, revelator, and prophet, having all the gifts of God, taking Moses for an example, which is the office and station of the above President Smith, according to the calling of God and the ordination which he has received. And that's an awesome, clear statement about the power and authority of the priesthood. Then it goes on to say, second, the office of assistant president is to assist in presiding over the whole church and to officiate in the absence of the president, according to his rank and appointment, viz. President Cowdery first, President Rigdon second, and President Williams third, as they were severally called. The office of this priesthood is also to act as spokesman, taking Aaron for an example. The virtue of the above priesthood is to hold the keys of the kingdom of heaven, or the church militant. That's a significant phrase we could delve into, but we won't right now. But then he goes on to say, the reader may further understand that the reason why High Counselor Cowdery was not previously ordained to the presidency was in consequence of his necessary attendance in Zion. He was out in Missouri to assist William W. Phelps in conducting the printing business, but that this promise was made by the angel while in company with President Smith at the time they received the office of the lesser priesthood. And further, the circumstances and situation of the church requiring Presidents Rigdon and Williams were previously ordained to assist President Smith. Now, this is all very, very dense, concentrated doctrine, but it's awesome. And it explains why Oliver was not ordained to the first presidency initially, but also that the promise had been made to him by the angel. It's another testimony of the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood, which we don't often look at. I mean, I don't know how many of people watching this broadcast have ever seen this testimony of the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood, because it isn't publicized that much. But it's right here in the Joseph Smith papers. Anybody can read it. You know, when I first started talking about letter 7, people were saying I was referring to him as President Cowdery, and a lot of people said, what are you talking about? He was never president of anything, because this part of church history has been forgotten or overlooked, or however you want to call it. But he was the assistant president of the church when he wrote those letters. At least
maybe we should just explain, just in case somebody doesn't know about letter 7, just that that Oliver Cowdery basically was tasked with the goal of writing the history of the church for Joseph Smith, correct? Yeah,
and see, here's what it says. Just to reiterate this, it says the office of this priesthood that Oliver was ordained to is to act as spokesman, taking Aaron for an example. Aaron was the spokesman for Moses, right?
Right.
Oliver was the spokesman for Joseph Smith. And so when he was writing these church history letters, he had the assistance of Joseph Smith, but he was the spokesman, and he was the assistant president of the church. So he was the second elder. He was next to Joseph. He acted in Joseph's place when Joseph wasn't available, and so on. And so these were not just church history written by someone who didn't know what they were talking about or had no authority. He had all the authority to represent the church and to, like it says here, to preside over the whole church and be the spokesman.
Yeah.
So in letter number 4, there were 8 essays that he wrote that were published in the Messenger and Advocate. In letter number 4, or essay number 4, he described Moroni's visit in a lot of detail. And that's when he told Joseph Smith that the record had been written and deposited not far from his house. Now, that means that Mormon and Moroni were abridging the plates not far from Joseph's house.
In New York.
In New York. I mean, it's just it's as clear as words can be. They couldn't have made it any clearer.
Right.
And then the other, letter 7 that you mentioned earlier, is the one where he describes the Hill Cumorah and the scene of the final battles right there in the mile-wide valley west of the Hill Cumorah. So I assume most readers are familiar with, if you're not familiar with letter 7, you can look it up on the internet or whatever and learn about it.
Or you can get Jonathan's book, Letter 7, which has all the letters in it, but also has some explanation as to the, and this basically addresses one of the big questions that a lot of people have had, and that is the idea of Hill Cumorah in New York being the actual Hill Cumorah of the Book of Mormon.
Right.
And of course, with this letter 7 that Oliver Cowdery, with the help of Joseph Smith, ended up writing for, which ended up being the history of the church, much of it. He makes it very clear that the Hill Cumorah of the Book of Mormon is the Hill Cumorah there in New York, which has implications for the geography of the Book of Mormon as well.
Yeah,
that's where the final battles took place.
Yeah, the key point here is to understand why Oliver Cowdery was the assistant president of the church. That is a promise made by the angel, who we know was John the Baptist, right? So they decided they needed to follow the direction of the angel and put him in that position. And he was in that position until I think it was 1838. Remember when in the Kirtland Temple, which we'll talk about in another week or so, when Moses and Elijah appeared and restored the keys, they gave the keys to Joseph and Oliver together. It wasn't to either one of them individually. Okay, so the next thing that happened is leading up to section 107, because here you see that organization we just talked about, the 1833 structure. Now there's the 1835 structure, where we have the presence of the high priesthood, we have the presidency of Zion, presidency of Kirtland, president of the 12 and the 70s. All this organization that section 107 talks about was fulfilled here in the 1835 timeframe. And that's what section 107 talks about in a lot of detail. And we won't take the time to go through this slide, but I just wanted to show you how the organization of the church under Joseph Smith progressed according to the needs of the membership. The first time, when there was just a handful of members, they needed a first and second elder, and that was about it. And then in 1831, 1832, they had the presidents of the high priesthood. Then in 1835, now they're calling the quorum of the 12 and the 70s and the high councils. And that process has continued through our day, now that we have area presidents and all the other, the several quorums of 70 and so on that we're all familiar with. So just to review this, I have this slide showing the first presidency. And section 107, verse 22 says, of the Melchizedek priesthood, 3 presiding high priests chosen by the body, appointed and ordained to that office. What does it mean, chosen by the body?
Well, I think we're talking about the body of the other priesthood, the apostles, basically.
Yeah, those who have been ordained apostles, and then it says the key that I highlighted here is upheld by the confidence, faith, and prayer of the church. Form a quorum of the presidency of the church. So there's 3 components of sustaining the brethren, right? The leaders: confidence, faith, and prayer. So let's talk about each of those briefly. When it says that they are upheld by the confidence of the church, what do you think that means, or how do we understand that?
It's a good question. I mean, basically upheld by the confidence. It a little bit reminds me a little bit of the of like monetary systems and around the world. Basically, they work as long as people have confidence in them.
Oh, that's
but if people have no confidence in them, then all of a sudden they fall apart and so forth. And I think that President Nelson gives, he just exudes confidence. I mean, a skilled surgeon. I mean, he's excelled in the things that he's done in his previous occupations and his previous endeavors, and then he's brought those skills and things with him to, as he presides over the church. So I think but if there was a situation where where a leader of the church did something that caused people to lose faith or lose confidence, that would obviously have an effect on what's going on here as far as the chosen by the body, appointed and ordained to that office.
Well, I like what you said about confidence, because it's an element of trust, right? We trust our leaders, and they are upheld by the trust of the church, the trust of us church members. The second element is faith. Faith would involve believing what they're telling us and acting upon it, right? Faith is a principle of action. And so we can trust them, we can take action based on what they teach us. And finally, the prayer of the church, we pray for them.
Yeah.
We ask the Lord to bless them with health and wisdom and inspiration, revelation. And those three components are very profound. We could do a whole lesson on it. But it's something, when we say we sustain someone, it's really a component of trust, faith, meaning action, and prayer. So I thought that was just an awesome section or verse in the section 107 to explain how we sustain our leaders.
Yeah.
The next one it talks about is the 12 traveling counselors, who are called to be the 12 apostles or special witnesses. And it says they form a quorum equal in authority and power to the three presidents previously mentioned, which we all know that, but it's spelled out here in section 107. And then the next one after that talks about the 70. I know when I was younger, we used to have 70s in the stake, so I was ordained to 70. I was involved in missionary work and so on. And then to respond to the needs of the church, that was modified to be only the 70s are at the general or area level instead of at the stake level. But the 70 also form a quorum equal in authority. But verse 27 here is the one I think is important to remember. It says, every decision made by either of these quorums must be by the unanimous voice of the same. That is, every member in each quorum must be agreed to its decisions in order to make their decisions of the same power or validity one with another. And you can see how difficult that is when you have a bigger and bigger group of people. I mean, it's one thing to have the members of the First Presidency all agree. A little more difficult maybe to have the 12 members of the Quorum of the 12, but then when you have all the 70 to have unanimity, that requires a lot of deliberation, compromise, and inspiration revelation.
Yeah, I know that there's even been times in the Quorum of the 12 and so forth where there's been different topics that have come up that have been quite divisive, and they've had to go back and forth, and there was quite a bit of discussion, and I guess sometimes they even got a little heated a few times, But ultimately they all basically they come together at some point, and those who need to humble themselves or whatever, and they all pray about it, and they come to the conclusion based on what they understand from the prayer, from their prayers and from the inspiration from the Lord, and then they basically move forward.
Yeah, and getting back to these essays or letters of Oliver Cowdery's, they were unanimously approved because, first of all, Joseph helped write them. Oliver Cowdery was designated as the spokesman like Aaron. Sidney Rigdon gave express permission for them to be republished. And Frederick G. Williams copied them into Joseph's own history as part of his life story. So the entire First Presidency was unanimous on these when they were published.
Yeah.
So that's just another indication of how significant they were. Okay, then the last two verses of section 107, I think, are important for everybody, because it says, wherefore now let every man, meaning every man or woman, every man, woman, you could even say child for Aaronic priesthood and young women. Now let every man learn his duty and to act in the office which he is appointed in all diligence. So no matter what our calling is, these same revelations apply to us in terms of learning our duty, acting in the office. He that is slothful shall not be counted worthy to stand. And he that learns not his duty and shows himself not approved shall not be counted worthy to stand. Even so, amen. That's where it ends. It ends right there. So we should be considering when we have our various callings or duties or offices that we don't want to be slothful, right? We don't want to not learn our duty. And so that's kind of the gist of section 107, is it doesn't spell out everybody's duty. It just spells out some of the responsibilities and then says you need to learn your duties.
Yeah.
For that we have a handbook now, right? But anyway, that was my little part that I wanted to share from that section of 7.
All right, and I've got a few other things to include as well. And then in section 107, if we go down to verse 40, it says, the order of this priesthood was confirmed to be handed down from father to son, and rightly belongs to the literal descendants of the chosen seed to whom the promises were made. Who are these promises? Where do these promises begin, actually? And in verse 41, he answers kind of that question. He says, this order was instituted in the days of Adam. Yeah. So this goes all the way back to the very beginning, the first man on the earth, Adam, and came down by lineage in the following manner. Then he basically goes from Adam. We have Adam who had Seth, who had Enos, and then he had another son. His son was named Canaan. This is how it was handed down. The priesthood was handed down from Adam, Seth, Enos to Canaan, and actually talks about that all the way through verse 45. God called upon Canaan in the wilderness in the 40th year of his age, and he met Adam in journeying to the place called, I love this the name of this place is Shedalamak. Yeah. So they went to Shedalamak. He was 87 years old when he received his ordination. And then Mahalalel was 496 years and 7 days old when he was ordained by the hand of Adam. Anyway, and he's talking about this. Enoch was, talks about their ages at the time of this, when this happened. But if we go all the way down here, verse 52, Noah was 10 years old when he's ordained under the hand of Methuselah. So this is being passed down over and over again. And this was all kind of going on. And then verse 53 has some really interesting implications. And maybe for a little bit of context here, I think it'd be important to just ask the question, where was the Garden of Eden? Where was it located? And of course, we know that it was in Missouri, essentially. And if that's where the Garden of Eden was, then when Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, where did they go? Did they travel thousands of miles away on other continents? Did they stick around the general area there? And this kind of answers at least partially that question. In verse 53, it says that 3 years previous to the death of Adam, and as I understand it, Adam lived 930 years. So Adam at this point is now 927 years old. Okay, he's getting to be an old man, but he hasn't yet lived a day yet. That the Lord said, the day that thou partakest of the fruit thereof, thou shalt surely die. If that's one of God's days, and God defined the day as 1,000 years on the earth, and he's still under a day old as far as God's time is concerned. And he says, and he called Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, and Methuselah, who were all high priests, with the residue of his posterity who were righteous, into the valley of Adamandiamon. Oh my goodness. And there bestowed upon them his last blessing. Well, if Missouri was where the Garden of Eden was originally located, and this is 927 years later, and Adam is still there, along with all of his posterity, to be there, they had to physically be there so that Adam could put his hands upon their heads and and actually ordain them. Then the question is where was Adamandiamon located? And so I've got a couple of things here to help identify this. Let me just open this up real quick here. So I'm going to go there, and I need to just share this particular screen here. So this one right here. All right. Can you see that? Hopefully you can see that. There we go. Okay, so this is the Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa area. Back in the time. So you can see right in the center of it is essentially as Adamandiamon. And then you have just below that is Gallatin. Then you have some later church history up here in Garden Grove, Mount Pisgah, Council Bluffs, the Winter Quarters. You have Nauvoo over on the upper right-hand side, and you can see where that's located, and there's Carthage and Quincy and so forth. But this area around Far West, Liberty, the places that we're talking about in this area, the people were gathering essentially down in that general area by in Jackson County, Missouri. That's where this Zion was coming from, and Adamandiamon is located just up above, just north of that a ways. And so how do we know if is that the actual Adamandiamon? So far, Jonathan, I have never heard of anybody that's promoting a two Adamandiamon theory.
You know, I haven't heard of it, but no doubt someone has.
Somebody has. But how do we know that that's Adamandiamon? Actually, it actually comes from section 116 in the Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah.
And when section 116 is a one verse section. And it says right here, I just turned over to it, section 116. This is it was a revelation given to Joseph Smith near White's Ferry. It says, Spring Hill is named by the Lord Adamandiamon, because, said he, the Lord, it is the place where Adam shall come to visit his people, or the Ancient of Days shall sit, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So, so this is where it was located. And just in case anybody is looking for a sign, there's your sign.
There's a sign.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the official sign there. And this is a little close up of that. A lot of people haven't ever been to Adamandiamon, so I thought I would share just a couple of aerial photos of Adamandiamon. That's the general area there. The river takes a big bend right there, and then the area of Adamandiamon they're talking about it's actually quite a large area, but the area kind of in the center of this picture with the trees is kind of the main area, and I'm going to talk about just for a second some things that were found there at Adamandiamon. This is from a different angle. You can see the river, and it bends around there, and it kind of forms this big valley. And the Adamandiamon area is this entire valley, but also what we consider Adamandiamon, as far as if you go to visit Adamandiamon, it's the area of the trees that's just a little bit to the left of center in this image.
Yeah.
This is again looking for a little bit different angle here from the drone. This is an old shot that was done, quite a long time ago, and it shows that you can kind of see the river. You can't really see the bend of the river, but you can see the river going off in the two different directions there in the Adamandiamon area. And this is actually kind of how it's laid out. So you can kind of see you have the Grand River there. You have the big valley of Adamandiamon there. You have Tower Hill and Spring Hill. You have the temple site further up on the hill, and then the road which you get into is up there by Highway 13. So that's actually what you can see there. Okay. Now, if you go there, there's this plaque that was placed there by the church, and it has some information about this valley and so forth. And you're kind of overlooking the valley when you come and look at this placard here. But I wanted to point out a particular part of it here, and that is this part right here, which it says, by following the roads as marked, visitors may see the area of Spring Hill or Adamandiamon. Also, there is an overlook of the western portion of the valley of Adamandiamon from a prominence called Tower Hill. Tower Hill is a name given by Joseph Smith because of the remains of an old Nephite altar. The exact location of the structure is not known today, and there is no visual evidence remaining. That last part of it actually has been somewhat changed here, and I'm going to share a little bit of that with you in just a second. But this image here is a really old image of the Nephite altar at Adamandiamon. Apparently, the Nephites understood that this was the place where Adam gave his righteous posterity their blessing here. And then shortly after that, just within a fairly short period of time, the posterity of Adam basically lost their way and apostatized, and it get down to Noah, who was only 10 years old at the time when he was ordained by Methuselah. But he then built the ark, and then this whole area was destroyed in Noah's flood. And the ark was basically built here and ended up in the mountains of Ararat over in Turkey. But the point basically here is you have the Nephite altar was still in existence here, even up to when there's time of photography. So this was sometime later on, but this is the a picture of that area. Now seated, kind of squatting down in the center of this is Wayne May. Probably most people recognize him, but just to his right or your left is Kay Godfrey. And he's also quite a historian and archaeologist, and he was involved with BYU and the church. And there's a little stone marker sitting right in front of all of us, right there. And that stone marker is supposedly the marker of the place, and it's actually sitting on top of a bit of a mound. You can actually see the mound, the shape of the mound that we're all standing there on. And this mound basically has this little concrete thing. It doesn't have anything written on it or anything. It's just sitting there. But it was placed there, as I understand it, by BYU and the Church History Department as a marker of where the Nephite altar actually used to stand, where the Nephite altar was actually located there. So this is one of our tour groups. There's another tour group here at that same marker here. And then I wanted to share with you a couple of things. First off, where does the name Adamandiamon even come from? Adam was the first man of all men. Aman is one of the names by which God was known to Adam. So Adamandiamon is a name carried over from the pure Adamic language into English, is one for which we have not been given a revealed literal translation. But as near as we can judge, and this view comes down from the early brethren who associated with the prophet Joseph Smith, who was the first one to use the name in this dispensation, Adamandiamon means the place or land of God where Adam dwelt. So Adamandiamon, basically is the place where the land of God where Adam dwelt. And that's an interesting statement, because also in other revelations that we've already gone through, I talked about God said, my holy land. And he's talking about far west in that area, and where the temple will be built in far west, and he called it my holy land. So that's an interesting other aspect of it. This is Adamandiamon, the place, the land of God, and then God calls that place my holy land. So that's consistent. When the altar was first discovered, this is from History of the Church, Volume 3. When the altar was first discovered, it was about 16 feet long, about 9 or 10 feet wide, having its greatest extent to the north and south. The height of the altar at each end was some 2.5 feet high. So that was. Remember now, this is an altar from God, basically, and God told the Hebrews that altars had to be made not of hewn stone, but of uncut, rough, natural stone. So they would just stack the natural stones up, and it was about 2.5 feet deep and gradually rising higher to the center, which is between 4 and 5 feet high. So it actually, you can kind of think of it as kind of a mound of stones, if you will. Okay, the whole surface being crowning. Such was the altar at Diamond when the prophet's party visited it. Now, however, it is thrown down, and nothing but a mound of crumbling stones mixed with soil and a few reddish boulders mark this spot, which is doubtless rich in historic events. Again, that's from History of the Church, Volume 3, in the footnotes. So I just thought you'd like to know about that. That picture actually shows a very similar thing, 16 feet long, 10 feet wide. But by that time, when the picture was taken, it had been thrown down a lot. This is from the life of Heber C. Kimball. Said the prophet Joseph called upon brother Brigham Young, that is, myself and others, saying, brethren, come, go along with me, and I will show you something. He led us a short distance to a place where were the ruins of 3 altars built of stone, one above the other, and one standing a little back of the other, like unto the pulpits in the Kirtland temple, representing the order of 3 grades of priesthood. There, said Joseph, is the place where Adam offered up sacrifice after he was cast out of the garden. The altar stood at the highest point of the bluff. I went and examined the place several times while I remained there. So this was a different altar, not the Nephite altar, but this was the Adamic altar that was still there apparently at the time when Joseph Smith was there. So I just thought I would share that, share a little bit of that information with you there. But the reason why I think this is so critical or so important to understand is that it actually puts to rest several falsehoods that have been promoted out there involving the Book of Mormon and geography and Noah's flood. There are those who even within the church who believe. In fact, there was a LDS Living article about 3 years ago written by a guy who basically talked about Noah's flood as being a myth, and said that there's no evidence for a worldwide flood. It was probably just a local flood, or maybe it was actually just symbolic flood. In fact, because there's no geological physical evidence for a worldwide flood, is what his basically claim was. And that's hard to understand when you understand if Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and that was here in the heartland of America, and then Noah ended up over in the mountains of Ararat in Turkey. Brothers and sisters, like I said to lots of different groups, that is one heck of a local flood. Made it halfway across the world, basically, in this local flood. But it verifies that also later on in the Book of Mormon, actually earlier on in the Book of Mormon, the Book of Ether, they talk about when the Jaredites made it to America, that the land, they said, had been cleansed by, what it said, when the floodwaters receded from off the face of this land.
Right.
So that means that Noah's flood was over here in America, but Noah and his family ended up over in Turkey, which again testifies to the reality of Noah's flood. And then, and of course, then if this is where, Adamandiamon is located, and we know that Adam and Eve were there, and we also know that there were Nephites there, then it also tells us a lot about the geography of the Book of Mormon, potentially, because if there was a Nephite altar there, there's a pretty good bet there were Nephites there. I think that's a really important tie-in, and that verse has really been important to understand. It kind of puts a lot of historical things together when you realize that by revelation, we know where Adamandiamon is located in section 116. There's no question about it. There's no two Adamandiamon theory like there is a two Hill Cumorah theory, and it puts together a lot of things. So there we go. Yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else then in section 107 that you did not cover that I wanted to cover? And the answer to that is no. So, let me share the screen back. So, Jonathan, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share. This is just fantastic information. There's
so much we could talk forever, as we all know.
Yeah.
But I think we hit the key points, and it's awesome to see how the revelations fit with the extrinsic evidence too, and that the Doctrine and Covenants proves the Book of Mormon, which proves the Doctrine and Covenants, and they both prove the Bible, and they both prove the influence of the Christian leaders like Jonathan Edwards, and it's all one seamless web that fits together.
Yeah.
And that's why, when people go off these tangents down in Central America, or the stone in the hat stuff where they bring in outside things that don't make sense, it undermines the entire narrative of the restoration. And so I love the way you're approaching every one of these lessons in the Come Follow Me, to show how everything fits together so well.
Yeah.
So
and it really is beautiful. Listen, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us for this week, and we're looking forward to upcoming lessons. We have about 3 months or so left of the year.
Months.
And so much of the history, though, that we know about the book, about the early church history, is actually coming up in these next 3 months, because there's just a lot of things in the Nauvoo period and things that we're not even into that point yet. And then also finally the period basically of the Exodus, to Salt Lake and so forth. So we have a lot of things to cover still. Brothers and sisters, I hope you're enjoying these podcasts. Thank you, Jonathan, again for doing that. Give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying this information. If you're finding brand new stuff, if there's things that you haven't heard before, you haven't seen, probably many of you have never seen the early pictures of the Nephite altar there at Adamandiamon, or know where that's located, or have seen the marker. Some people have probably seen the marker and didn't know what it was.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
So we want to encourage you, if you have a chance to go with Jonathan and I on one of our tours or whatever, we actually will take you there and show you those markers and things like that. And it's really just an amazing experience. But
you want me to tell you a funny story about Adamandiamon?
Yeah.
We were out there one time, and we were, where you kind of go to the end of the cleared area, and then there's a fence, and then they're farming on the other side.
Yeah.
So I wanted to take my little group. I had some friends from France that were with me. I wanted to take them down into the valley and see the cabin and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And the guy mowing the lawn there came up to us and said, "Well, I can't really let you cross here, but I'll tell you what, I think you need to go see a guy in the bookstore down by the Far West Temple site. He's a tall guy. He's kind of balding. Go talk to him." And I thought, I didn't even know there was a bookstore there, So I said, okay. So we went down to the bookstore I'm talking about, right?
Far West Bookstore, yeah.
Yeah. So I walked in there, not knowing why I was even there, and there's this tall guy walking by that was kind of balding. He was leaving. And I said, "Before you go, the guy over here at the Adamandiamon told me I needed to talk to you." And he said, "Well, that's weird because I don't usually even work today. But this morning when I got up, I felt impressed that I needed to come into the store. I've been here all morning. I don't even know why I'm here. I was finally giving up to leave, but I'll be happy to talk to you." So I said, "Well, tell me what you got. I don't know why I'm here to talk to you." Just the guy, the mowing the lawn. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you about this awesome book. We're totally out of them, but it's a book about the lost city of Zarahemla. And the guy who wrote it is some retired lawyer or whatever." And I said, "That was me that wrote that book." And he goes, "What? You're the guy?" And so, I mean, it was this crazy thing, And we ended up talking for an hour about all amazing things going on out there. Yeah. But it was just a really funny experience with Adamandiamon. So then we ended up going over to the temple site there at Far West. And I told you I had these French friends with us, right, from Paris.
Yeah.
And we kind of looked around. As I was leaving, I was out on the street ready to leave, and another car was coming, and I just felt prompted to say, "Go back and talk to the people in that car." And by now I'm going, whatever, I'll do it, So I backed up, went over and parked next to him. The guy got out of the back seat of the car, and my friend from France, Gabriel, you know him.
Gabriel, yeah.
Gabriel, I think his name was, I can't remember his name, but it was like Jean-Luc or something. "That's Jean-Luc." And it was a friend of his from his mission 40 years ago that he hadn't seen in 40 years because they had moved to different cities. This guy moved to southern France. This was long before the internet days, and they just totally lost contact. They hadn't seen each other in 40 years until we parked next to each other at the temple site at Far West.
Wow.
It was incredible. And then we ended up having all kinds of other connections with him, but that was a memorable day there, meeting people just because of the Spirit telling you to do stuff, and that was out at Far West and Adamandiamon.
I'll tell you, one of the first times I ever went out there was with my family, and the whole area was just so overgrown with Russian olives that you couldn't really even hardly go down the pass. It was just crazy. My dear friend Elder Joe J. Christensen, which by the way, he just passed away about 2 or 3 or 4 months ago.
About 3 months ago,
yeah, 3 months ago. But he was actually put in charge of Adamandiamon. He was overseeing all of Adamandiamon for probably about 8 or 9 years, and the first presidency. And during that time frame, they went in there and they just went to town with on those Russian olive trees and cut most of the Russian olives have like thorns literally about like this long.
Right. They're terrible.
They're awful. And then they have these weird other trees. They call them. They have thorns even longer than that. But anyway, so they went in there. They cleaned out most of those trees and all the underbrush and everything, so you could actually get around a little bit in there and see things. Mm-hmm. And but he said that there's a serious reverence there at Adamandiamon.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
This is some sacred stuff, and that's what this section 107 is. One of the things I loved about that is when it talks about this order instituted from the days of Adam. And I think that's the final thing I wanted to just say about this is basically that those of us who have been blessed to live in these last days, these latter days of the world, and be part of the restored gospel, we need to understand that this isn't something that was made up by Joseph Smith. This is not something that was started or that was perpetuated by by President Nelson. This is actually connecting us with the very beginnings of humanity. That from the very start, Adam had these things, and then God basically has handed these things down and reinstituted him and preserved him and so forth. You look at the history of the world going down from from Noah and down to Abraham and down through Moses and so forth, and then to Christ himself, and then Joseph Smith and the Restoration. It's just absolutely amazing to look at the ways of God as he preserves this priesthood and moves it down throughout all of humanity, and think about how blessed we are. We are such an incredibly small, almost inconsequential group of people when you consider the entire world and how many people are in it and so forth. And what a blessing that it is that we have the gospel in our lives, and that we tie into this ancient order of Adam and his posterity. So that was my final little thought there.
Excellent. Good thought. I appreciate that.
Well,
all right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week, everybody. And enjoy this. We're going to be here next week. We're have some good things going on there. And till next week, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. See you next week. Bye-bye.